the next one of our questions from our big question series. Today I've got Peter Walker from the United Church Theological College, isn't it?
Yes, United Theological College, Richard. Yeah.
Now, Peter, we're going through these big questions, and we've picked you for one of the deep theological ones. Someone has put in for us, I read in Mark, for the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Mark 10:45. To whom was the ransom paid? Surely not Satan. Tell us the answer. What?
Fantastic question. First, compliments to the person who asked it, because they're being thoughtful about the biblical text. And it's caused me to give it some thought too in prelim to this conversation. I guess the first thing, so to say the first thing is, let's have a little think about the text itself. And then if it's okay, let's have a little think about salvation in a broader sense. So the kind of active ingredient in this text is the word ransom. And for your questioner's interest, and for all our friends at Terrigal for their interest, the Greek word there is lutron, and it we take it into English as ransom. And any of Jesus's initial hearers would have tuned into the word lutron as meaning a ransom paid either to a foreign power or to redeem someone from slavery. And actually, it's the only time in the scriptures that word lutron appears, but it does, some of its kind of semantic cognates appear elsewhere in the Bible, and it's always used to refer to a ransom either from a foreign power or from slavery. So the first hearers would have tuned into the word ransom and immediately thought, it's a ransom from something that's kind of enslaving me.
So the foreign power one, would that have often been like a tax to Rome kind of thing from the conquered peoples?
More so that it was not unheard of course, for people to be taken into captivity by foreign powers.
Yeah. And
so a kind of a payment in ransom to redeem those who were held in captivity is what lutron means. So, okay. You know, Richard gets captured by the people in Avoca, and the people of Terrigal decide they actually do want Richard back. They decide to pay a lutron, a ransom, to the people of Avoca to redeem him from that foreign power.
I would deeply appreciate that. I don't know if I'd want to be trapped in Avoca forever.
Yeah. So that's that word kind of initiates the kind of active ingredient behind your questioner's question, which is, so who is the ransom paid? And is it paid to Satan or the devil? That's where I think we begin to branch out into theology. It's not named in the text to whom the ransom is paid.
Yeah.
And at the risk of going on too long, it opens up, I think, some thinking about the different motifs of salvation and how we think about how it is that Jesus's death, how that ransom actually redeems us from something that enslaves.
Yeah. So what are some of those different realms? I would be interested in that.
Good. Yeah. Okay. So one of them actually is the idea that this is a ransom being paid to Satan or to the devil. The second is that Jesus's death is somehow a sacrifice that releases us from some sort of debt. And the third is that Jesus's death is a kind of demonstration of something. So are you happy if I just articulate a little bit about that?
Very happy for you to go through the three.
Okay, good. So the first model of thinking about the nature of Jesus's death is that a ransom is paid because we are in bondage to something. And to Jesus's first hearers, they would have thought about themselves as being in bondage to the principalities and powers that would be named as evil, Satan, or the devil. So that language of principalities and powers and that idea of being in bondage to evil powers is quite common in the letters of Paul and quite common in Mark's gospel.
Yeah.
So Jesus's first hearers probably would have heard the word ransom as meaning he is giving his life in order that we might be redeemed from the powers of evil, which enslave us. So that's that first model, the model of sort of Jesus's death releases us from bondage, rescues us from enslavement. The second model is probably best called kind of like the sacrificial model or the substitutionary model. And in that idea, our condition, as it were, is not that we're in bondage to something, not that we're enslaved to something, but rather that we are in a condition of guilt. And for that guilt, we need forgiveness and freedom. And so Jesus gives his life as a sacrifice in order to, as it were, clear our debt. The third model is sometimes called the revelation model or the demonstration model of salvation. And in this model, it's not that Jesus' death frees us from something like the first model, and it's not that his death redeems us from guilt. Rather, his death actually demonstrates something. And the thing it demonstrates is the depth of divine love. It's a lasting demonstration of the depth of divine love. So he gives his life, no less a sacrifice, but he gives his life not to pay someone back for a debt and not to release us from bondage, but rather to demonstrate the depths of God's love.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, sorry, I'm going on a bit, aren't I?
But no.
What we have in Mark is an articulation of that ransom model, that rescue from bondage. But elsewhere in the biblical witness, you'll find evidence for the sacrificial kind of substitutionary idea. In other words, the redeeming of guilt. And you'll also find evidence for the demonstration model that what his death did, that was a sacrifice to demonstrate the depths of divine love.
So in a sense, you've sort of got a smorgasbord of ideas of what it might mean for us today. Like there's And how do we, as we read the scriptures, I suppose we pick up those different flavors from different parts of the Bible as we go through the New Testament?
Yeah, I think it's possible to find, even in Paul's letters alone, 4 or 5 different theologies of salvation. And so here's an interesting sort of fact I think that you'd be interested in, Richard, and other listeners, is that the church early came to a definitive statement about who Jesus is. The Nicene Creed decided that Jesus is Son of God, divine, both human nature and divine nature. We decided to make an authoritative statement about who he is, but the church has never made an authoritative statement about the nature of the salvation that he achieves for us. So there's a bit of bandwidth, to use that current phrase, around our thinking on salvation. And so those 3 motifs are supported by the biblical witness, and you could probably find a couple of other minority voices in there as well. So I think the takeaway for us today is that there are different ways of thinking about salvation, and we probably shouldn't let anyone think there's only one correct way. It's not to say that you don't respect each other's theology of salvation, but even the biblical witness itself provides a bit of bandwidth around how we understand Jesus's death and our theology of salvation.
A bit like from my house, there are 3 ways I can drive to Erina Fair. All of them are quite valid ways to get there, but like in a sense, the ultimate goal here is we get salvation. Christ saves us in that saving act.
Yes.
The how is up for conversation, and probably not necessarily debate, because you don't need to panic about which of those 3 is the poster child. In a sense, all of them are a valid pathway. One of them is true, but all of them are valid pathways.
Yeah. Another thing of interest would be to say that the rescue, the ransom model that your questioner has landed on here in Mark chapter 10 was more common in the first sort of first several centuries of the life of the church. Then that sacrificial substitutionary model whereby Jesus's death pays back a kind of a guilt before God was more common in the Middle Ages, in the feudal period. And the demonstration of God's love idea around his sacrificial death has been more common since the Enlightenment. And it says something about the human condition. Early church, early centuries of the Christian message, most people believed in evil spirits. Most people believed in a satanic figure, a Satan. And so there was something about feeling bondage to those evil powers that was present in those early centuries that might not be as present to us today. In the Middle Ages, in the feudal system where, you know, there was a lord, you owed tribute to the lord, and if you didn't pay your tribute, you were guilty. That kind of thinking was more common at that time. And since the Enlightenment, with its focus on, you know, education and learning, the condition that the demonstration model speaks to is a kind of condition of ignorance. And so the demonstration of God's love on the cross has resonated more since, say, the 17th century, because we live in an era where being educated is kind of a pathway to success. Yeah.
And if you went to one of my Easter sermons, you'd probably see some brutalization of all three being squashed into a 5-minute talk.
I doubt it.
That's fantastic. I found that incredibly helpful, that those looking at that. Is there any more that you would want to say? Otherwise, that's been really helpful.
I'm sure I've said enough, Richard, and just thanks to your questioner. And, you know, it just goes to show if we spend time just dwelling in the biblical text and allowing it to speak to us, you never know the riches of thinking that come from it. And so Mark 10:45 is a very influential passage, and it's great to have been able to have a chat about it with you.
Yeah, isn't it great that we can actually gain so much if we really sort of immerse ourselves into the scriptures and really look at them with a bit of depth rather than a cursory glance.
Yep. Begin again at the beginning. Go back to the text and think it through from there.
Thank you so much, Peter. That has been really helpful.
Pleasure, Richard.